Hey man, let's get something clear right from the start. When it comes to how a woman experiences life, relationships, and love, it's not logic that dominates her reality. It's emotion, it's sensation, it's the stories she builds inside her own mind. For her, fantasy isn't just entertainment, it's the lens through which she interprets everything around her. A romantic movie, a TikTok montage, a fleeting moment of attention from a guy she barely knows, all of it becomes the foundation for her emotional reality. And when you, as a grounded man, try to introduce truth, logic, consistency, she'll often reject it. Not because she's evil, not because she's playing games, but because your truth doesn't feel as good as her fantasy. And in her world, feeling always wins. You ever been in a situation where she told you how much she loved you, how special you were, how you were different, only to watch her ghost you a week later without a word? That confusion you felt, that emotional whiplash, is the result of her emotional world not matching yours. See, when she said those things, she meant them. In that moment, those feelings were real to her, but then something shifted. Maybe the energy changed, maybe her hormones dipped, maybe she got bored, and just like that, the fantasy collapsed. And when it collapsed, so did the truth she built around it. That's the danger of trying to build a future with someone who lives inside a story instead of facing the raw, unfiltered present. She doesn't live in the moment with you. She lives in the potential of the moment. You see this play out constantly in dating. A woman will meet a guy, project all her hopes and dreams onto him, and fall in love with the idea of who he might be, not who he actually is. She doesn't know his values. She doesn't study his character. She doesn't care about the red flags. Because the story is more intoxicating than the facts. And if you don't fit her story, she won't change the story. She'll change you. Or she'll replace you with someone else who better fits the fantasy she's chasing. That's why the perfect guy often gets dumped for the toxic one. It's not about who's better, it's about who fuels the emotional roller coaster her fantasy thrives on. The toxic guy represents chaos, passion, unpredictability, and those things feel real. Even if they're toxic as hell, fantasy doesn't just shape how she sees men, it shapes how she sees herself. That's why you'll meet women who are broke, miserable, and confused, but still think they deserve a man who's rich, emotionally mature, shredded, successful, charming, and available 24/7. They don't see the disconnect between who they are and what they demand, because in their fantasy, they're already the main character, the queen, the prize. And anything that threatens that illusion, accountability, standards, truth, is rejected violently. Try pointing out the inconsistency, and you'll be labeled insecure, controlling, or toxic. Not because you're wrong, but because you're disrupting the dream. And that dream is more sacred to her than your logic will ever be. You can tell a woman the truth 1,000 times, but if it doesn't feel true, she won't believe it. You could show her your loyalty, prove your love, provide stability, and be the calmest man she's ever met. But if the story in her head says, I need butterflies and passion and mystery, then your presence feels boring, your love feels dull, and she'll chase the guy who gives her emotional sparks, even if he's a complete mess. Why? Because fantasy is addictive. It's not about stability, it's about stimulation. And this is where so many men get broken. They gave her everything real, but she craved what felt real. That's the trap. And unless you learn to see it for what it is, you'll keep losing to illusions. Fantasy is also the reason closure is so hard to get from women. You're looking for a real answer, you want to understand what went wrong, but she doesn't have a rational answer, because in her world, the ending of the story doesn't need to make sense, it just needs to feel right. And if ghosting you gave her emotional closure, then that's what she did. She didn't think about how it affected you. She didn't consider your emotional reality. Because her fantasy had ended, her internal narrative shifted, and once her feelings died, her loyalty died with them. You were expecting her to honor the past, but she lives in a world where only the present feeling matters. And if she doesn't feel it anymore, it never existed to her. You ever wonder why women will sabotage a perfectly healthy relationship with a good man? It's not because they want to destroy something good. It's because the relationship didn't match the fantasy they were sold. Love songs, social media, Disney movies, they all told her love should be magical, dramatic, all-consuming. So when things start to feel stable, she panics. Why isn't this more exciting? Why don't I feel obsessed? Is this really it? And instead of realizing that true love is calm, mature, and consistent, she assumes something's wrong, so she pulls away. She chases drama. She convinces herself that you're not the one because you're not triggering that fantasy-based high anymore. And the relationship dies, not from lack of love, but from unmet illusions. Fantasy is her shield. It protects her from reality, from disappointment, from growth. Because if she admits that she's been chasing illusions, then she has to face herself. She has to question her choices. She has to take accountability. And most women today aren't taught to do that. They're taught to follow their heart, to trust their feelings, to never settle. So they jump from man to man, situation to situation, hoping the next chapter will finally feel like the fairy tale. But it never does. Because the problem isn't the men, it's the lens. She's wearing rose-colored glasses and blaming reality for not matching the filter. And the more you try to wake her up, the more resistance you'll face. Because waking up hurts. It destroys the dream, and the dream is what she lives for. This is why you can't out-logic a woman into loving you. You can't argue her into attraction. You can't debate your way into her heart, because her decisions aren't made in the courtroom of logic. They're made in the theater of emotion. And in that theater, you're not being judged on facts. You're being judged on vibes, on how you make her feel, on whether or not you fit the character she wrote in her mind. And if you don't, she'll either try to change you or she'll leave. Not because you're wrong, but because the story demands it. That's how deeply the fantasy runs. It becomes the script of her life, and you're either cast as the lead role or written out entirely. So what do you do as a man who lives in reality? You stop trying to be her fantasy. You stop performing. You stop twisting yourself into someone else's emotional story just to be chosen. And you start building a life so rooted in truth, so powerful in presence, that any woman who enters it has no choice but to drop the fantasy and face the man. You lead with clarity. You move with purpose. You make peace with the fact that not all women can handle reality, and that's okay. Let them dream. Let them chase sparks and shadows. But you remain unmoved, because you know that fantasy fades. But truth builds kingdoms. You need to understand something, brother. Fantasy is her comfort zone. It's where she gets to feel powerful, adored, desired, without doing the work to become the woman worthy of those things. It's easier to imagine a man chasing her through a rainstorm, confessing eternal love, than to build real intimacy with a man who demands accountability. That fantasy is where she's never wrong, never boring, never flawed. It's where everything revolves around her emotional validation. But when you, a grounded man, bring standards, boundaries, and clarity, she'll see that as cold. She'll see you as distant or emotionally unavailable. But you're not. You're just real. And that's the one thing her fantasy can never handle. She wants the thrill of romance without the responsibility of consistency. She wants to feel adored without having to earn it. And when the reality of who you are doesn't match the fantasy she built in her mind, she won't compromise. She'll simply rewrite the story. One day, you're her king. The next, you're the villain who changed. You didn't change. Her emotional script did. And now she's recasting the roles. You can't take that personally. You must realize that she's not reacting to you. She's reacting to the emotional narrative she crafted inside her head. You just happen to be the character she inserted for this chapter. And here's where most men go wrong. They try to win her back into the fantasy. They apologize, they chase, they adjust their behavior, hoping to re-trigger the emotional dream that once made her obsessed. But you can't resurrect something that was never built on reality. That version of her, the affectionate, passionate, emotionally invested woman you remember, was a temporary projection, not a consistent person. So when you beg for her to come back, you're not just lowering yourself. You're begging to return to a world that never actually existed, and that's the fastest way to lose your power as a man. The truth is, if you want to lead a woman, you must first lead yourself out of illusion. You must become immune to the emotional bait she unconsciously sets when her fantasy begins to unravel. The sudden coldness, the confusion, the inconsistency. These are not signs that she's evil. they're signs that her internal script is collapsing. And instead of rewriting it to match your truth, she's trying to pull you back into her old one. But if you bite, if you chase, if you try to convince her of your worth using logic or love, you lose. Not just her, you lose yourself. This is why detachment is your greatest weapon. When you detach, you force her to sit with reality. You remove the emotional fuel that powers her illusions. Suddenly, she's not the star of the show anymore. She's standing in silence, wondering why the audience left. That's when the discomfort hits. That's when she questions the story. That's when, if she's capable of growth, she might begin to wake up. Not because you chased her, but because you didn't. Because your silence forced her to look in the mirror. And if she can't handle that mirror, she'll blame you. But if she can, you'll see a different woman emerge. But don't confuse that potential with a guarantee. Most won't wake up. Most will run to the next guy who gives her butterflies and confusion, because that's safer than facing the truth of her own emotional immaturity. She'll call you cold, heartless, emotionally unavailable, not because you were wrong, but because you didn't feed her fantasy. And that's your power. You didn't bend. You didn't perform. You didn't sacrifice your integrity just to make her feel comfortable in her illusions. And while that might not get you the girl, it will keep you the man. Fantasy is a drug. It gives her the emotional high of being chosen, pursued, worshipped, without the responsibility of reciprocating. And just like any addiction, when the high fades, she needs a stronger dose. That's when she'll stir up drama. That's when she'll test your boundaries. That's when she'll provoke you into acting emotional so she can feel something again. But you must not react. You must hold the line. Because once you do, you become the one man she can't manipulate. The one man she can't decode. And that mystery, that emotional self-control, that's what triggers the deepest respect. You don't get a woman's soul by chasing her fantasy. You get it by standing so firmly in your truth that her fantasy either dies or evolves. Most women aren't used to men who say no, who walk away, who don't need their affection to feel valuable. But that's exactly why they crave those men, because deep down, her fantasy is exhausting her. The emotional roller coaster, the endless search for a man who fits the illusion, it's wearing her down. And one day, she'll look for peace, for leadership, for strength. And when she does, she'll remember the man who never flinched. But you must understand this. You can't force her to wake up. You can't drag her out of the dream. She has to feel the consequences of staying in it. She has to suffer the emptiness of chasing butterflies instead of building a life. And your job isn't to wait around, hoping she comes to her senses. Your job is to keep building, keep leading, keep grounding yourself in reality so deeply that any woman who joins you has no choice but to level up or leave. Either outcome, you win. Because you never bet your future on someone else's fantasy. So remember this, when her actions make no sense, when her words contradict themselves, when she pulls away without warning, it's not because you failed, it's because her emotional story shifted. And in that story, you're either the dream or the disruption. Your power lies in not caring which role she gives you, because you know who you are, you know what you offer, and you know that truth, unlike fantasy, never fades. That's what separates boys from men. Boys chase the dream. Men live in reality and let everything else chase them. The deeper you go into understanding female psychology, the more you realize that emotion often overrides everything else. To her, a moment of emotional intensity, whether it's love, excitement, or even chaos, feels more true than a year of consistency. This is why she might leave a stable man for a toxic one. Why she might sabotage a peaceful relationship to chase some wild flame she barely knows. Because the calm man doesn't make her feel alive, not in the way her fantasy demands. And it's not that she wants the drama, it's that she associates that drama with passion. And in her mind, passion is proof of real love. But you, the man rooted in reality, must understand if she needs chaos to feel alive, she was never ready for a life with you. You will meet women who swear they want stability, a good man, loyalty, and depth. But their actions will show you something else entirely. They'll get bored with steady love. They'll test your silence. They'll create problems where none exist, just to feel something. That's the moment most men make the mistake. They react, they explain, they try to stabilize her storm with logic, but the storm was never meant to be understood. It was meant to trap you in her emotional loop. You don't fight that by engaging, you fight it by opting out. By saying, if you want chaos, you'll have to do it alone. This is why fantasy is her default language. It gives her the illusion of control. She gets to be the heroine, the victim, the misunderstood queen, all without the discipline of actual self-reflection. And what's worse, the world she lives in, social media, rom-coms, pop culture, validates this mindset. It tells her that her feelings are gospel, that any discomfort is toxicity, that a man who holds his ground is controlling. And you, the grounded man, become the villain in her emotional fairy tale. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you refuse to participate in her performance. The moment you become emotionally indifferent, not cold, but calm, she loses her script. You're not reacting, not feeding the drama, not chasing the illusion. And that's when she begins to question herself. Because most men in her past couldn't resist the bait. They'd over-explain, over-text, over-promise, just to be seen. But you step back. You let her wonder. You let her feel your absence. And in that silence, the fantasy begins to crack. She realizes something. You are not like the others. You don't need her chaos to feel alive. You are already full. And that, ironically, is what starts to draw her in. You must understand this. The man who feeds her fantasy becomes disposable. The man who challenges it becomes unforgettable. She might resist him at first. She might push back, rebel, even label him cold. But deep down, she knows this is a man she can't control with her emotions. And that realization either terrifies her or attracts her, sometimes both. But either way, it marks the shift, because now, for the first time, she's not in charge. She's not the director of the emotional movie, you are. And the only way to maintain that power is to never sell yourself short for the sake of her emotional comfort. That doesn't mean you're unkind. That doesn't mean you ignore her. It means you stop performing. You stop explaining your worth. You stop defending your boundaries. You simply exist as you are and allow her to rise to your level, or not. And that's the beauty of masculine detachment. It's not passive, it's powerful. It says, I'm here, I'm grounded, I'm clear. If you can't handle that, I won't chase you into your chaos. And brother, once you embody that, everything changes. She will test you less. She will try to understand you more. And even if she doesn't, you'll never lose your soul trying to hold on to hers. See, fantasy gives her 100 outs, 100 ways to avoid accountability. I just didn't feel it anymore. The spark was gone. It's not you, it's me. These aren't lies, they're emotional shortcuts. She doesn't need evidence, just a shift in her internal weather, and she's gone. Meanwhile, you're stuck replaying every moment, trying to make sense of nonsense. But here's what you need to know. You weren't the problem. Her fantasy just expired. And instead of owning that, she blamed the reality standing in front of her. Don't take it personally. Take it as your cue to level up. Most men stay stuck because they confuse emotional inconsistency with mystery. They think, if she's hot and cold, it must mean she's complex. No, brother, it means she's fragmented. It means she hasn't reconciled the gap between her fantasy and her actual capacity to love. And until she does, she'll keep bouncing between men, searching for the one who perfectly fits her imaginary checklist. But that man doesn't exist. And if you try to become him, you'll lose yourself in the process. Never mold yourself to match a woman's fantasy. Let her see you fully, and let that be the test. She will tell you that she wants a man who listens, who opens up, who communicates. But watch what happens when you do. She loses interest, not because you did something wrong, but because it was too easy, because it killed the narrative, because she didn't have to earn that debt from you. That's the paradox. She wants vulnerability, but she also wants to feel like she earned it. If you give her everything up front, she doesn't see value, she sees weakness. So you must move with intention, share with discernment, let her curiosity do the work, not your need to connect. And here's the brutal truth. Man, sometimes you will be discarded, not because you lacked value, but because your value required too much self-reflection, because loving you meant facing her own illusions. And not every woman is ready to do that. Some are addicted to the high of fantasy, to the novelty, to the endless scroll of what-ifs. And no matter how grounded you are, no matter how much you offer, she won't see it, because she's still asleep in the dream. Your job is not to wake her. Your job is to walk. And if she ever wakes up, she'll remember the man who didn't beg to be in her dream, but demanded to be met in reality. She'll always say she wants a man who can handle her emotions, but the truth is, most men can. What she really wants is a man who doesn't react to her emotions, because that's the only way she feels safe. If you flinch every time her mood shifts, she'll never see you as stable. But if you hold steady, even when she storms, even when she throws confusion, tears, or silence at you, something shifts in her subconscious. She starts respecting you, even if she can't admit it, because you're not giving her the control she's used to. You're not shaping yourself to match her feelings. You're standing tall and letting her emotional waves crash without pulling you under. Her fantasy tells her that love is supposed to be effortless, that everything should align perfectly, that if it's hard, it's wrong. But that's the biggest lie of all. The truth is, real love challenges you. It breaks the parts of you that are still clinging to fantasy and builds something stronger in its place. But only the rare woman accepts that. Only the woman who's done with illusions, who's tired of chasing dopamine and ready to build something solid. And she's not looking for a man who entertains her dream. She's looking for a man who makes her wake up. That's who you must become. Most of the women you meet will want reality, but they won't be ready for it. They'll admire your clarity, your standards, your stillness, but they won't know how to stay with it. Because the moment you don't bend, the moment you don't entertain the emotional games, the fear kicks in. The fear that they'll have to grow, that they'll have to take accountability, that they'll have to change their own behavior. And that's when they ghost. That's when they say, I'm not ready. And they're right, they're not. But that doesn't mean you soften, it means you harden your standards. You are not the therapist. You are not the emotional support pet. You are not the fantasy character she designed in her head. You are a man, with direction, with vision, with purpose. And if she can't meet you in that place, then no amount of kindness, patience, or communication will save it. Because she's not rejecting you. She's rejecting the part of herself that knows she can't maintain the illusion in your presence. Your strength confronts her. Your calmness triggers her. Your clarity exposes her confusion. And if she hasn't done her inner work, she'll run. And that's okay. Let her. You must become the kind of man who lets people leave. Not because you don't care, but because you care about yourself more than the illusion of connection. Detachment is not indifference. It's self-respect in motion. It's knowing your soul was not built to constantly repair broken fantasies. It's knowing that if a woman truly wants to be part of your reality, she'll align with it, not ask you to dim it. And the more you practice this, the more you'll see the world for what it is. Most people are running from truth, and they'll resent you for standing in it. Stand anyway. The most painful truth, sometimes the fantasy of who she could be, will keep you trapped longer than her actual presence. You'll replay the best moments, the deep conversations, the way she once looked at you like you were her whole world. But you'll forget that those moments were often emotional highs, not sustainable love. You'll forget how quickly she flipped, how her words didn't match her actions, and how often you ignored your gut just to keep the dream alive. That's the real heartbreak, not losing her, but losing your grip on the fantasy. Mourn that and then move forward. You don't live in that dream anymore. When you walk away from a woman who lives in fantasy, you're not just leaving her, you're reclaiming your grip on reality. You're saying, my life will not be dictated by someone else's emotional roller coaster. You're drawing a line that says, I don't care how good it felt, I care how true it is. And that mindset, it changes everything. It attracts women who've done the work, who no longer want to be rescued by love but want to build it, who no longer need fantasy because they've found their own peace. But to attract her, you must become him first. And here's the secret, brother. The less you chase fantasy, the more reality chases you. The less you bend for emotional approval, the more respect you command. The more you say, this is who I am, take it or leave it, the more the right people stay. And that includes women, because a grounded man is rare. He's not reactive, he's not desperate, he's not trying to fix anyone. He leads. And only a woman who's ready to be led will follow. Everyone else? Let them float in their dreams. Let them wait for butterflies and signs and perfect moments. You're too busy building something real. The world doesn't reward men who entertain illusions. It rewards men who stand in truth, even when it's lonely, even when it's misunderstood, even when it costs you a relationship. because the man who refuses to betray himself for approval will always win in the long run. He doesn't win by getting the girl, he wins by getting peace, by living a life that aligns with who he is, not who he thinks he has to be loved. And when you reach that level of detachment, that's when everything you used to chase starts chasing you. So the next time you feel yourself slipping into a woman's fantasy, pause. Ask yourself, is this love or is this projection? Is this truth or is this just emotion? And most importantly, does this relationship require me to abandon myself? If the answer is yes, you already know what to do. Walk. Let her chase dreams. Let her live in her movie. But you live in reality, because that's where the real ones are. That's where peace is. That's where love begins. Not in the fantasy she scripted, but in the truth. You refuse to compromise. Be that man, and everything that's real will find you.